It's time to get the Halloween decorations away. You know what that means, right?
This is Viewer Takeover, where we film every Monday night, except for last Monday. Well, we did, but we didn't. I don't know. It gets really confusing really fast. And we're bringing to YouTube every Tuesday morning. Most Tuesdays, except for last Tuesday. We tried. It didn't work out. It gets confusing really fast. My name's Brian Paul from this channel right here, PSVR Without Parole, and the coffee's in full effect, and the guys to my right, the boys, Dave from Dave Station VR.
Ooh, I can tell you're jacked in from that. Oh yeah, that rev that's a coffee rev. I feel it.
And that guy on the right-hand side of the screen is AJ from The Underground. PSVR Underground.
What's up, guys?
Not too much, sir.
You're really riding my energy wave there, aren't you?
Yeah, I hope I can, because I didn't have that much myself, so I'm just going to absorb all of yours if I can.
And every week on Viewer Takeover, we like to thank a whole lot of people, and the first person we want to thank, of course, Romero the Game Cat, for that awesome Viewer Takeover introduction. Jeez, I hope I don't get a copyright claim for that.
I mean, you know, it's the time of the season. Everybody's feeling that vibe. The radio stations are switching over already. It's time. You might not get to see your family this year, but Christmas is coming.
That was fantastic intro, and I always love saying his name because I get to go Romero, the Game Cat.
Yeah, my skin crawls just hearing you say it that way. If you want to introduce next week's show, I don't know, you might get to. I'm not sure how many more are in the queue. Send your short, sweet, seductive, possibly southern, sultry. I don't know. I'm Brenna. I should think about this ahead of time.
Sultry, southern.
Southern's good, yeah. Anyone more?
Dress up like Dolly Parton.
Chicken fried Viewer Takeover intro. Bring it to us.
Without Parole at gmail.com.
This is already off the rails. I love it.
Totally off the rails. But of course, we also want to thank these people down here. These are the people who went to patreon.com/withoutparole. And they're the ones giving us $1 or more every single month. Trust me when I say that hopefully it's just $1 to you, but it means the world to us. You guys are the ones, along with all the people who donate during live streams, that are really keeping this channel running, and we thank you so very much for it. AJ, who else do we want to thank this week?
Brian, you got me all fired up now, man. You're like a good coach, man. You should be a football coach, a high school football coach.
If I knew how to play football, man,
I like that you took it down a notch. You were like, you should be a coach.
I'm ready to get that W. I don't know what we're playing, but we're going to win. This week, we would like to thank those who support us by changing their name to something Game Cat related, or something Game Cat adjacent, as you, Brian, or something Game Cat adjacent would like to say. And this week, we have 7 new Game Cats to welcome to the Game Cat.
A bacon dozen.
I like that I tried to cut. I was like, I don't know how many fingers that is.
He's too fucked up on coffee, guys. He can't figure it out.
Starting with hashtag Game Cat in the comments below.
It's got to be hotcakes, right? It's been a while since I copied and pasted this document. It's always hotcakes. Starts and ends.
Leading by example, telling you like how you can support us. Change your name to something Game Cat. Get creative with it. Have some fun with it. Knock yourself out, but safely. We've also got He's Got the High Ground, Game Cat.
Good ground to have.
The High Ground Game Cat, formerly known as the Scaredy Game Cat, I think. Not a heavy commenter, but here nonetheless.
Next, we have George T. Cat, Game Cat adjacent. Another Game Cat adjacent, and he pities the fool who don't play PSVR.
I like that we've got more Game Cat adjacents, but I'm still curious. What does T stand for? Is it George the Cat? Is it?
No. It's Tiberius, George Tiberius Cat.
Of course it is. Tiberius.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Hell yeah. We've also got Buscemi, the Panther Game Cham.
How's it going, fellow kids?
Fellow PSVRs.
I beat you to it.
What's a cham? Somebody just got a name. Let us know in the comments below. What's a cham?
I feel like that's got to be European slang. I guarantee you it's European slang. So calling somebody a cham, I'm sure it means something.
Next, we've got DK, the two-wheeled Game Cat. Now, I don't know if you ride a motorcycle or if you're maybe handicapped in a wheelchair. If you're in a wheelchair,
as I said, sometimes one leads to the other. So be careful out there, guys.
Whoa,
If you're riding around.
Damn.
If you're in a wheelchair, I just want to let you know you're my fucking hero, and I love you.
And if you ride a motorcycle,
you
you're Dave's hero.
No, if you're on a motorcycle, you're good. You're on a motorcycle, you're cool, man. Like you don't need my approval.
Wait. If I ride around in a wheelchair, will I also be your hero?
Yes, absolutely.
There goes
If you are playing PSVR with
go.
some kind of handicap or disability, yes, I love you.
Oh, I was just going to ride in the chair. That was the extent.
I want to
wasn't
send
going to
you
go
a
further than that. Okay.
One time,
You are my hero. We've also got Sophie, the Kitanoichi #GameCat
It's a good one.
creator, Dreams creator,
Kitanoichi?
Steam Dreams creator.
Yeah, the Garden of Eden, or Welcome to the Garden of Eden, I believe, was Sophie's creation.
Yes.
Nice little twist.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I think Sophie's new to our community and has been around quite a bit lately, and I really...
Last but not least, we've got K-Panic, the impossible Game Cat Whopper. Oh, you son of a bitch. Why'd you have to remind me? I was so like Burger King free out of my mind. I had it like 5 times during that contest, never won anything. And it was disgusting. The impossible Whopper was the only like thing that I was like, okay, this is okay. But everything else was just gross.
Nice.
So gross.
I'm still disappointed that you can't appreciate a flame broiled Whopper, but
Yeah, I would totally eat like 7 of those. I could totally
they're
kill
pretty
7 in a row. Dave, what do we really do here on Viewer Takeover now that we've gotten all the thank yous out of the way?
typically what we do is we scour the internet for a total of 3 questions asked to us by some viewers out there, either in the Discord, which there is a link for below. That's where the conversation happens 24/7. And otherwise, if you leave a comment with a hashtag Viewer Takeover on any YouTube video on this channel, we'll find it. But this week, we've only got one question because it's a big one. So this question actually comes to us from Billy Paw, the Game Cat, who commented on PSVR this week. And he says, I know all of you guys have been playing PlayStation, or no, he didn't say that. He said, I know you guys have been PlayStation fans since the beginning. What are your favorite games for each PlayStation? And ignoring backward compatibility, which PlayStation console was your favorite? Hashtag Viewer Takeover like a pro. So yeah, we could talk about this for like an hour and a half, probably.
There's only one way to tackle this. And I guess it's console by console, starting from the very beginning. Do you guys want to start from the PlayStation 1?
Can we just start with 5 and go backwards? And I'll say Bug Snacks, and then we move from there.
Listen, PlayStation 1 came out, what, 95?
Yes.
And I remember when it came out, or leading up to its launch. I remember I was such an I was obsessed with Electronic Gaming Monthly. I would scour every single page. Oh, we scour again, nice. And there were all these different upcoming consoles over like the years leading up to the PlayStation. You know, between obviously there was the Saturn, but then there was like things like 3DO and CDI from like unproven companies who'd never really entered the video game market before. And it was like, and I actually kind of thought, oh, PlayStation, Sony's giving it a shot now? Man, this is going to be just another disc-based game console failure. So imagine my shock when this thing actually took off.
Yeah, they seem like they know what they're doing at this point. I think they got something going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, we didn't really know the history, right? We didn't really know the history of, like, you know, them teaming up with Nintendo and you know, making a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo and blah, 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 and that's how all this started. We didn't know that, you know, but I think working with Nintendo sort of gave them kind of gave them their bearings, maybe, that other game developers didn't have, or other game console manufacturers didn't have. What games stood out for you guys in this generation?
Well, so the first one, I mean, I got to say, obviously, Final Fantasy VII left a huge impression on me, as I'm sure it did anybody who played it. At that time in my life, I had never seen a thing like that. And like some of the moments in that game just are emblazoned on my brain forever. Like I'll remember Aerith, spoilers, sorry, getting killed by Sephiroth until the end of time. So that was a really big one. As far as what I played the most, it was probably like Tekken or something. Me and my friends just fucking around. Tekken 30, I think. So many good PS1 games, though. What are you guys thinking?
PlayStation was special to me because I grew up with Nintendo. I was like a big side scroller Nintendo NES guy. Then Super Nintendo came out, and that was the same deal. But I always loved platformers. And when I first saw PlayStation 1, it was like I saw like Dirt Rally and Crash Bandicoot. And I was just like, what is this? This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I need this. So my family was always strict about video games, so my Christmas present in like 96, 97, something like that, was that I was allowed to save up all my hard-earned money from mowing lawns, painting houses and stuff, and I was able to buy myself a PlayStation. And the game that I wanted was Twisted Metal. I used to go to Circuit City and stuff, and I could spend there all day playing a demo disc of Jumping Jack Flash, Jumping Flash, not the Rolling Stones song, Jumping Flash, Battle Arena Chichinden. And then I remember playing like Twisted Metal and being like, this is amazing. So I saved up all my money, bought my PlayStation, and came back home. And I couldn't actually afford Twisted Metal because it was too much. So there was one game that was on sale that I could afford with my PlayStation, and that game was Jet Moto. And I love Jet Moto. It will always have a special place in my heart. That being said, there's so many games. Obviously, Metal Gear Solid was iconic. Soul Reaver was a big one. And Twisted Metal 1 through 4, I beat every single one of those. I was obsessed. But the game that meant the most to me, still to this day, is my favorite game of all time, is in fact Final Fantasy 7.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Jet Moto again.
No, and I'm curious to see how many people
Bloody
got
roar.
to that first.
Bloody roar.
I love so many PlayStation 1 games. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
But I wonder how many people did the same thing that I did, where they got to the first boss and it says attack while the tail is up, the Scorpion boss, and then they attacked and got killed. And like I remember being like, I hate this game, screw this game, whatever. And then I gave it another shot later on when I tried it again and saw the full message there. And then I ended up beating the game with even without a memory card. I just had my PlayStation on for like months. And
wait, you didn't have a memory card?
I didn't have a memory card at first. I like didn't plug it in or something. So I had my PlayStation on. It was like a journey. It was just epic. I was like, please don't let the power go out. And I ended up beating Final Fantasy VII, and it's my favorite game to this day. Red 13.
Is anyone else aware that we blew way past the fact that AJ got a bullshit Christmas present of allowing himself to buy a PlayStation 1?
I know this story, though. Your parents were not video game fans, were they?
No.
That's all I took from that story, was that like your parents were terrible at giving Christmas presents.
I hope they give you something in your stocking at least,
man.
Like after that.
Doesn't matter. I love my parents. They always raised me with like having to work for everything I get. So it really taught me a valuable lesson. A lot of
they don't watch this, right? They don't watch this, do they?
No, they don't. I don't tell them about this.
Fuck you, AJ's parents. Shame. You shouldn't have done that thing. You should have just bought him a PlayStation.
No, dude. I had to beg for toys. Like I get like one toy I get to pick from, and they'd be like, "That toy looks violent. You can't have that one." I was like, "Come on."
AJ gets one toy a year. He gets
the world is violent.
Really good at it, right? This explains everything.
I love my parents. My mom has always been more supportive about video games. But dude, guys, one other thing before we hear Brian, we got to hear which your game is. But the one thing that I wasn't expecting when I brought the PlayStation home, the fucking demo disc. The demo disc was amazing. It had like Parappa on it. It had Intelligent Cube. It had all this stuff. And then if you pressed like some buttons, it would flip the menus. And there would be a code, and there would be secret games on that demo disc that you could play, and all of a sudden you'd have like Fighting Force that you could play.
Oh, Fighting Force! I remember that. So actually, one cool thing about PS1 before we get to Brian is I loved that it was the first console where stuff like that could happen. Like, Parappa the Rapper, Intelligent Cube. You couldn't have even conceived of these games, not graphically, but just like nobody was making shit like this on Genesis.
Right.
These kind of weird, unique IPs, kind of throwing it all out there and being like, let's do something stylish. Let's kind of make a name for ourselves. And it worked. It was really inventive period for Sony. And they nailed it, really.
Yeah, I mean, they got really inventive. The fact is that late in the generation, they actually, this kind of resonates, I guess, with a lot of PlayStation VR gamers, because later in the generation of PlayStation 1, they released a controller that finally had analog sticks on it.
Yeah, right. And they're like, there's one game you can play with it, Ape Escape.
Game that's required to use it, right?
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I remember being like, I don't know if I want to go down this route, like where I have to where I get this controller, but I do want to try this game. And it was so cool. It was an innovative control scheme. It was a very cool way to use it. I mean, before people really were like, oh, use the right stick for the camera. That was such a cool thing to do. I don't know if everybody knows my PlayStation 1 story. I'll try to make it as brief as possible. But like my favorite games leading up to this point were probably Maniac Mansion back on the Commodore 64 and NES, and Alone in the Dark, which was like probably the coolest survival horror before survival horror was a thing kind of game. And I remember showing up, and I was at the gas station downtown, this tiny little town that I lived in, and my friend Mickey Gustafson shows up, right? Also at the gas station. She's like, "You gotta come check out this thing." I hadn't seen him in years, right? But we were video game friends from back in the day. And he goes, "You got to come to my house and see this new game that I'm playing." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, let's go." I'm just like fucking ditched all of my other plans. We're going to Mickey Gustafson's house. And we went, and he showed me Resident Evil 1 for the first time. And it was life-changing.
When that zombie turns around and looks at you.
Yeah. Dude, and just watching these pre-rendered environments with the 3D characters, which was Alone in the Dark, but so much better done, and it was Maniac Mansion without the goofy humor, which, I've never been a comedy person. I was like, this is everything I've ever wanted in a video game. This is amazing. And so I finally got my PlayStation, because my parents are way better than AJ's. And and they got me Crash Bandicoot with it. I was like, this is fantastic. I love Crash Bandicoot. But it took me months and months and months to save up for Resident Evil. And of course it was unbelievable. Now, Resident Evil 2, though, is going to be my choice, because I feel like there was no way in hell Resident Evil 2 was going to live up to the greatness of the original, at least in my head. And even Capcom, they had gone forward and made what's now known as Resident Evil 1.5. They got partway through development. They just canned it. They canned the game and started over from scratch, because they're like, no, we got to make this thing epic. We got to make this thing great. And you could just tell that they cared about Resident Evil 2 as much as I cared about Resident Evil 2. In that game, I like that. I've been playing through RE2 Remake on PlayStation 4, or now PlayStation 5, and I still like the original RE2 better. I just love everything about it. I love the pixelated graphics and the art style and in the story, and just the open raccoon city at the beginning. It's not open, of course, but you're running down the streets, everything's on fire. It just felt epic, man. Yeah. One of the best games ever made in my book.
It still blows me away that's a PS1 game. Like it did everything it could so well, that PS1 sounds so antiquated, hardware wise, but like it looked pretty goddamn good at the time.
Yeah,
and I can't picture it any other way than the way I played it the first time.
I agree with Brian, except for with everything except for those goddamn tank controls. Those can go to hell. And
I love tank controls. Again, Alone in the Dark was like fine. I was like, I was used to it from like the PC days. So
and like you got all these other games that use the same control scheme, like Parasite Eve. Didn't Parasite Eve use tank controls? Did Galarian?
Those were
Galarians, by the way, my favorite Resident Evil clone. I'm glad you brought that.
Pretty cool game, but I think it was also tank controls. Yep. They all used the same thing, but it worked at the time.
Yeah,
with fixed camera angles and stuff.
And I will say this was one of the first examples of like a console in my book saying, it took a while for developers to tap the full potential. Like Super Mario World came out as a launch title, and I don't think, we got to the end of the Super Nintendo lifespan, and it was still like, that was still one of the coolest looking games out there. PlayStation 1 started with Ridge Racer and ended with R4, which looked almost next gen by comparison. Like they were really able to, these developers were able to suck the power out and figure out how to optimize their games and really just use every trick in the book to make their later games, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, look dramatically different than their launch titles.
It's funny how they still kind of do that trend. I mean, you look at the way they make games today. By the end of the console, you get Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us 2, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and how stunning they look. You really get the most out of them. It's pretty crazy that still to this day, 20 years later, 25 years later, that they're still doing this.
Yeah, agreed. Which means we should probably move on to PlayStation 2.
PS2.
Wow. PS2, the coolest looking PlayStation.
Well, eventually, I'll fight you. Eventually, it became the coolest looking PlayStation when they made the Slim.
Discs.
I never liked the way the original looked. It was just this weird tower. I was like, all right, whatever. But when they made it as small as a DVD case, I thought that was adorable. I was like, this is great.
Put it in your back pocket and take it somewhere.
Right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
The launch of the PlayStation 2 for me, I sat there and I waited and I waited and I waited until they said the words Twisted Metal. And as soon as Twisted Metal Black was announced, I'm like, here we go. It is PS2 time. I'm ready to jump into the next gen. And I went and got my PlayStation 2. I got Twisted Metal Black day one. Absolutely blew my mind. When it comes to my favorite games on there, Twisted Metal Black is one of them. I loved that. And, you know, Sons of Liberty, Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty, when you mentioned having a lasting impression with you, Dave, Sons of Liberty will forever have this lasting impression. Same goes for Snake Eater too, but the second game was just an absolute, like, just completely blew my mind and just looked so cinematic and amazing, and like really on an emotional level, even had me like when you're trying to save Otacon's sister and stuff from vampire, like it really like emotionally got to me. So those were two of like really impactful games. But also when it comes to gameplay, Devil May Cry. This is where the first time I ever played Devil May Cry, and that was like, okay, gothic Victorian hack and slash. Like I already loved Dynasty Warriors. I was like, this game was made for me, and I've played all of the Devil May Cries ever since.
Except for number 5, which you need to fucking play.
I've played it. I haven't beaten it.
A little bit. Okay.
Dude, that Metal Gear Solid demo alone, or Metal Gear Solid 2 demo alone, I was responsible for so much. I mean, first of all, it was responsible for selling probably 1 million copies of Zone of the Enders 1. Like, no one was going to buy that game without that demo disc included. I think everybody bought a $50 demo disc, and it also came with Zone of the Enders 1, which was good. Zone of the Enders 1 was fun. But man, it's like there were a lot of people saying the PlayStation 2 wasn't even as capable as like the Dreamcast at certain points. They were saying there was a lot of negative press around the PS2 that people were saying it was hard to develop for, a lot of stuff like that. And then when we actually got our hands on the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo, we were like, holy crap, everything's destructible. You know, you can shoot holes through everything and everything. I mean, I just remember being in the storeroom, right? I remember like hiding in the storeroom, and there was just like tons of stuff on the shelves, and you could shoot every single one. You could shoot ice, and then like the ice would fall to the ground and it would like melt over time. It was absolutely incredible, and I think it was something that PlayStation 2 gamers needed to prove that their system like had the chops to go the distance, and luckily Konami was able to get a lot of performance out at an early stage. I think the real stars of the show though for the PS2 era were Naughty Dog. You know, Naughty Dog like showed that the PlayStation 1 was capable of doing Crash Bandicoot, and they really pushed the system to its limits there. But to be able to make practically an open world platformer with like Jak and Daxter 1, which is still in my book the best Jak and Daxter, unbelievable. To be able to stand up on this, it was one of the first times I ever realized that you could have a game like this. You could stand up on top of a mountain and look all the way out and see things in the distance. And those things in the distance, like, you could get to. Just keep on running, man. We're going to get there eventually. Almost no loading screens in that game. It was so seamless. Unbelievable. Still one of the best platformers I've ever played. And then, of course,
I never actually played Jak and Daxter before.
What?
Yeah.
You can skip 2 and 3 and all the rest of them, man. But the first one, Precursor Legacy, is amazing. And I think you and I, while we wait for Dave to come back, are both going to agree very strongly about the GunCon 2 games.
Oh God, this is the second time you saved my ass with that. Those were like some of my favorite ones. Oh my God.
Right? Like where like, Sega was putting out games like House of the Dead and stuff. We're like, where's ours? Like we want games like that. And luckily Namco was killing it. The GunCon 2s were so accurate. I remember just pointing at the screen, the reticle just being like so spot on, like so absolutely perfect.
And it had like the force feedback and stuff, or whatever, the haptics, whatever you call it.
It was so good.
I got it for probably like Time Crisis or something, and then ended up keeping it for Ninja Assault, Vampire Knight.
I missed out on those ones. I played all the Time Crisis, and I had like maybe House of the Dead. I can't remember. I definitely had all the Time Crisis stuff you could get with the gun.
Yeah, Time Crisis.
And I would sit there in my living room taking over the TV. My parents watching me just pointing this dumb gun at the thing. And I loved it. It's like my favorite thing.
In Japan, they actually had a Virtua Cop collection for PS2.
Ooh, yes. Virtua Cop is a classic. They had a Dreamcast had a Virtua Cop. I've played that before.
You made some people happy there. Virtual Cop never gets enough love.
Oh yeah.
Right.
But so for this generation, for me, the one that really stood out is like, I think we talked about things that left an impression on you. Maybe not the best game, but like something that was a new experience that I had never had before. And like, I'll remember it was Eco, because that showed me that games could be like interesting and artistic and kind of mysterious. And like, it didn't tell me what the game was. It didn't show me what the game was. I just had to look at it and figure out what was happening. And there was something just so like interesting about that to me as a kid, that video games could be like that. I hadn't seen that before. So I really, yeah. And it's emotional too, but it's like wordlessly emotional. It's kind of, it evokes a feeling. And for me, video games had been, okay, let's beat each other up, or let's do this, or level up our team or whatever. This was a really interesting take on, what a video game was. So that really stuck with me in that generation.
Yeah. I think, as much as I loved Resident Evil 2 and all the, survival horror imitations back on PlayStation 1, I think the graphical upgrade that PlayStation 2 offered was when I think survival horror games really hit their stride. Just because you were able to convey a better feeling of terror, a better graphical sense of this stuff, and the audio
is that when we got Dino Crisis? Was that PS2?
Dino Crisis and 2 were both PS1, but we did get
gotcha.
We did get a gun survivor game. So it was a gun con game called Dino Stalker, and so that was that was a cool little side spin-off. But what I was going to say, it was really, I think the Fatal Frame games, especially the first one, I thought were like so graphically intense and terrifying. Play those games late at night with headphones on, and you come around the corner and there's a ghost, and you got to take the camera out and take the picture, and it's like, oh no, he's still coming at me, I gotta take more pictures. Like this, it was so intense. And like even games that weren't, I think, quite as good as that. I mean, Rule of Rose was pretty fucking good, but like Haunting Ground was okay. And God, what's the last one I'm trying to think of? Clock Tower 3. Capcom had ended up with the Clock Tower series at that point. And it's like, these are good survival horror games, but they were still so impactful because the PlayStation 2 offered a much better audiovisual experience, and it just worked better for that generation. No disagreements. I like that.
Was Fear Effect on PS2? I'm trying to remember where
Fear Effect was PlayStation 1.
Okay,
yeah.
I can't think of anything on PS2. but it's crazy to me how many games the PS1 had that seemed to me like they ought to be PS2 games, or like they were.
Yeah, it had like a library of over like 1,000 games or something like that.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Tenchu, I love Tenchu. I know we're going back to PS1. But...
Well, can we move forward to PS3?
Yes, we can.
All right. I mean, obviously, we don't need to go through the entire history of this, but obviously, Sony made a huge mistake, if you want to call it that, by trying to put too many features into the PlayStation 3, selling it for ridiculously over the top price, trying to say that $600 people were going to get a second job for. Don't worry, we're gonna sell this thing.
Yeah,
and
that's the deal with it of Sony's history.
Yeah, and it was like, in all fairness, we didn't really mention this, but like PlayStation 1 was a lot of people's first CD player. I mean, I know that CD's been around for a long time at that point, but still, people use it for a CD player. PlayStation 2 was my first and only DVD player ever, yeah. And the PlayStation 3 was my first and only Blu-ray player ever. So, I mean, as much as, the extra cost seemed prohibitive at first, I mean, Blu-ray players were going for like $1,000 at that point. So it was actually a really, really good price.
Yeah, that was a pretty smart move by Sony to be like, well, it's a media player that also does all this other stuff. Because nowadays, like, a lot of stuff doesn't even come with a disc drive and, all this. Back then, it was like revolutionary. I have a DVD player now, and I can play video games on it. That's cool.
Man, so PS3 is tricky for me because it was honestly, there was a lot of disappointment there. There were it was the end of Twisted Metal for me. Like, I was so excited for that game. They went multiplayer. They tried to focus on multiplayer, killed what made the single player great, and the game just like was a huge disaster. And then there was something else. Like we never really got like any good Final Fantasies on there. And Castlevania, Lords of Shadow was like such a big disappointment. I actually love the story and the narrative and the graphics of that game, but the gameplay is terrible and the pacing is bad. So there's a lot of ups and downs for me when it comes to PS3. However, there was a game in particular that I absolutely freaking loved and still do to this day, and that game is Lost Planet
Oh,
2.
I've heard of this one.
I love this game so much. I even got like my little brother to play it.
You got me to play it just recently.
I got you to play it recently.
Last month.
I love this game to death. This game was so ambitious and really got to, for the first time, really show you the power that the PlayStation console had by having you fight these huge, giant monster bosses and stuff. And the fact that it could even render that and like, it performed so well was just, and it had this amazing multiplayer at the time. It's basically a mix between survival, action, sci-fi, and like mechs and vehicles and stuff.
Ooh,
I was also a huge fan of Deus Ex. So when Deus Ex Human Revolution came out, that is a masterpiece of a game as well. And yeah, those two just had, there's so many other games that, came out to PSN that maybe already were out, like Crisis or, some other stuff that came like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, little side scroller, beat 'em up. There was a lot of great games on the console, but Lost Planet 2 and Deus Ex were definitely some of the most important key ones for me.
It's funny you bring up Lost Planet because Lost Planet for some reason has always gone side by side with Dead Space for me. Always. I remember being in the store and being like, Lost Planet, Dead Space. I don't know. And I was like, Dead Space. It's so much more horror. You can just tell based on the cover. And it was so I picked up Dead Space the day I bought my PlayStation 3 because I didn't buy a PlayStation 3 until the day the Slim model first came out. So it was like the price drop in the Slim model. And so I bought it that day and I went to Target as soon as I picked up my console and I was like, I had some time to kill. I looked around, I saw Lost Planet, I saw Dead Space. They were both in the bargain bin. Dead Space was $7 and I didn't know anything about it. And I bought it. And it ended up being one of my favorite games of the generation. And again, brought survival horror to a new level because again, the immersion was so fantastic. You got to love that, man. Dead Space.
You chose wisely.
Well, I did, of course, until Dead Space 2 was pretty good and Dead Space 3 was absolute garbage.
Good,
Yeah.
So,
Dead Space 3 fell off a cliff that you had to climb up and hit a quick time event, and then you had to get back up on the cliff by hitting X a bunch of times, and that's where it went. Disappointing stuff because that is a great series. I would love another Dead Space game. For me, I think the big one was The Last of Us. Like Eco, I said this is something I hadn't seen before in a game. They had already done Uncharted. They'd done some of these things that are like story based and had characters with relationships and motivations and well animated and all that. But for me, The Last of Us was the first game that was like really taking it seriously in a very solid way and like nailed the execution. Like the first truly like cinematic, epic kind of game. And they did so many interesting things with the world and the character building, and like the zombies are just not like any other zombies you've seen before in any other game. So they kept it pretty interesting and fresh, and just mechanically, it's a really solid, fun to play game, even though it's about the most disheartening things ever you could think of.
Right.
But I think the one that I probably played the most is Diablo 3.
Oh yeah,
I played so much goddamn Diablo 3.
We had a much better experience than PC did at launch.
Yeah. And because I had played Diablo 2 growing up, I think maybe on PS2, PS1, something like that.
PC.
No, I played it on a console back in the day, but Diablo 3 was just so much better, and I could sit with my friends. My ex-girlfriends used to like playing Diablo. Like, it was just fun. Anybody could pop in and play and get sucked in really, really easily. I've probably spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in Diablo 3.
Funny story about you mentioning Last of Us. Everybody was so excited for that game, and I was actually kind of like, what does everyone care about this game so much? Like, all I saw was like a gray old building with like a dude hiding around a corner with a gun. I was like, what is everybody so excited for this?
Why
I was
so
like,
serious?
I was like, because the hype for the game was just through the roof. And I was like, I don't care about this game. It's another zombie game. Who cares? And I was like, and it looks so boring and dull because I'm usually like all about this. Like, I mean, I was like all about fast, blistering, hack and slash or fast paced shooters and stuff. And then I played Last of Us and I was like, this is goddamn incredible.
Yeah.
Like this is absolutely amazing. Easily the best looking game on PS3. It looked like flawless. And just totally hooked me in. Was absolutely incredible.
And the fact that these are the guys who made Crash Bandicoot, it's just crazy.
Right.
That was a great game. This is a great game, but they're great in such different ways.
Right.
And to see a company develop like that, like I said, Uncharted was already great before
I was gonna say,
that.
shout out to Uncharted.
Uncharted is great, but like that was the one that really solidified it for me. Like they have matured. They are like a really strong, competent dev who could do things that other people wouldn't try to do and pull it off.
Yeah.
There was a lot of good games that came out later. I actually bought Ghostbusters before I even had a PS3. I had it like 2 years in advance, like ready for the day when I got it because I wanted it so bad.
On your finger sometimes, just and see what it felt like.
Brian, you mentioned the GunCon 2. There was something introduced that you might be a little familiar with today, called the PSI. I think it was called at the time. And Move controllers. This is when we first got Move controllers. I still have mine from the PS3 era. Still use them to this day. Way more. I have used them like hundreds of hours more, maybe even thousands of hours more than I ever did with PS3. But I got to give some quick love to like Resistance 3, Killzone 3.
Sharpshooter controller for sure, man. It was
aim. Sharpshooter. House of the Dead Overkill, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles HD. Oh my God, the light gun genre continues, and I've said a million times, this kind of paved the way for my path following these railgun shooters into VR.
Yeah, no, I was excited for the Move, man. I remember my ex and I went to Best Buy the day it came out. Like, God, we got to get up. I'm hungover, but we need to go, and like hopefully it doesn't sell out. Little did we know.
I think I did too, actually. Yeah, it was expensive.
It was expensive, and it came. You played Sports Champions. Sports Champions was so good, and definitely bought. I think I bought the Shoot. I don't know if that was a launch title, but I mean it was a bad light gun shooter, but still it was light gun shooting on PlayStation 3, and I kept thinking, I don't need my Wii anymore. This is what I got a Wii for. I can get rid of my Wii, as it turns out.
No, you need a Wii for Ghost Squad.
There's still a ton of stuff that didn't make it over from Wii, unfortunately. But PlayStation 3 to me, I mean, and don't get me wrong, the Move was huge. I still like the Move. I don't know if you guys ever played God, what was it? Start the Party. Start the Party was such it was Sony's attempt to capitalize on the Wii aspect of the Moves, like the party game sensation. And it was just like, and they used augmented reality and stuff, and so you saw yourself on the TV, and the Move was always something different. It was a big rubber gun or something, or if it was like a big fan, or I mean, it was all sorts of different things, and I had so much fun with that stupid game. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, or it wasn't bad, but it was just so silly and kind of more of a tech demo. But I actually had a lot of fun with it. I don't know. I've always been a fan of the Move since day one, and I just wish they had done more with them back in the day. I'm glad they finally did more with them for VR. But what really stood out to me during that generation was like it was really the birth of console open world games. So Fallout 3 really,
Skyrim.
I mean,
GTA 5. Yeah.
Sure, but Fallout 3 was mine. Right? Don't get me wrong. Grand Theft Auto 3 was whatever. I played that.
I was going to say, how did I not think about
Auto
Grand Theft Auto 3 during
Wait.
during the
about
PS2 discussion?
Right, five was on 3, and Grand Theft Auto 3 was on 2. But I mean, it's so they were open world games before, but this is like the first time where like one really spoke to me, where it was the vault opens up, right? After the whole introduction, and you're like all by yourself, and you step out into the world, and you're like, where do I go? And you're like, I can go that way. That way I can actually go anywhere, and so you just like venture off in a direction with no direction at all. We just be like, I'm gonna see what happens when I go this way. And so many games hold your hand now, and like and they set a point on the map and say you should really go here and check this out. Fuck that. Fallout 3 was like, good luck. see you in like 300 hours. And I was calling my friend. I was calling my friend every day when I was playing Fallout 3. He was living in Tennessee, and we were both playing Fallout 3 at the same time. And we were having wildly different experiences. He was living in an apartment with a dog, and I was like homeless with no dog. And I was like, are we playing the same game? Are you sure we're talking about the same thing? Just because we're having wildly different experiences. And I was like, man, open world games are so cool. It always seemed like a PC idea to me. And when consoles were finally able to handle it, man, I was just blown away. I spent 300 hours in Fallout 3 and loved every single minute.
Good stuff. That was definitely the start of open world games. Rough start, but a great start.
Yeah,
nonetheless.
Yeah. Final note is Ni no Kuni. Ni no Kuni is a beautiful game, man. I mean,
gorgeous game,
right?
Studio Ghibli.
Yep.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and who was it that made the Dark Cloud games? Level 5?
Level 5. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's who made it.
And so, I mean, you saw those guys, Dark Cloud 1 and 2 were a couple of my favorites on PlayStation 2, and here they are, like, really taking the formula and, like, really expanding it and kind of, like, capitalizing on the Pokemon thing, plus the Studio Ghibli stuff. I mean, it was beautiful. I loved every minute of that game. So much so, and this is weird to say, so much so that when they announced the sequel, I was like, I actually don't care. I
can't improve on perfection.
I enjoyed that experience so much. I didn't want to, like, taint it by playing something else that I might not care as much about. And so I never even touched the second one.
I didn't either, actually, but I probably should. Like, it's probably still a good game.
Yeah, it's probably amazing. I should play it too. So, does that bring us to PlayStation 4?
I think it does indeed.
Wow.
AJ, there were no Twisted Metal games on PS4. There were no Jet Moto games on PS4.
There was Calling All Cars, I think. No, that was PS3.
Was there a Bloody Roar game? There wasn't anything that you liked.
There's no Jet Moto, no Bloody Roar. Nothing
I
that
know.
I did.
Slim
So
pickings.
not even a Castlevania game, really, right?
You know what? It doesn't matter because Bloodborne, baby.
Oh yeah,
Bloodborne and No Man's Sky were definitely two of my favorite games on PS4 before VR. But yeah, Bloodborne, oh my god, just everything I wanted from a game, from the challenge to I have this thing like Devil May Cry. I have this obsession with Victorian, like Gothic era, whatever. And I have this like obsession with games that are in that era. That's why I'm really excited for Resident Evil Village.
You should pick up the Medieval remake.
I didn't pick up the Medieval remake, but I've beaten the
pretty bad.
I've beaten the Medieval original like a million.
Oh yeah, of course.
I'm good there, but yeah, the cool thing about PS4 is Sony took this new initiative of we're going to listen to developers. We're going to make everything really easy, not make the same mistakes before. And we're going to also really support indie devs. So I loved a lot of indie games too, like Transistor, Towerfall Ascension was absolute awesomeness. Yeah, Towerfall is so good. Even like there was like Jamestown Plus. I got into a lot of things. Rocket League.
Jamestown Plus.
Rocket League was actually my first platinum trophy ever because I just played the hell out of it that much. I played the original on PS3 as well, called Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Power Battle Cars.
Yes.
And the sequel is Rocket League, and amazing game.
Much snappier title for the second one.
Yeah, it's a little tighter.
A little better.
I like the first title better. Way better.
I do too. Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Power Battle Cars.
I don't know, guys. Like, PlayStation 4 came around, and this is the first time I ever was like, I'm going to get a console at launch, like an actual console. I picked up, I think, the PSP and Vita at launch, but for an actual console, this is the first time I was like, I'm going to pre-order it and buy and get it on Amazon, have it release day delivery, and it's the first time in my life where I was like, I don't want to say financially stable because I was still an absolute mess, but actually, I own my own place and I was paying my bills and everything was kind of okay for the first time ever. And I was like, I think I can swing this. And I did. And then it got here and it was like, wait, what am I going to do with this? Like it didn't resonate with me that much. Like I was like, of course I was looking forward to Bloodborne. Bloodborne was amazing. And I played The Order 1886 and that was not so amazing. And I played all the big games that were coming our way. But I was very quickly realizing that I was like, I'm losing interest in my favorite thing in the world. It's not grabbing me anymore. I'm not enthralled with my experience. These games are not blowing me away anymore. And I never cared about graphics, right? I cared about the experience and how games made me feel or the fun element of it. And so here we were, and it was like PlayStation 4. I was like, okay, these are slightly better than PlayStation 3 graphics. And I don't care about that. Mm-hmm. And there's not really a game here that's like, and Resident Evil 5 came out, and I was like, oh my god, this is like, what are we fucking doing?
Capcom had like a 10-year lull that was really bad.
Right.
It's really bad.
Right. Well, I'm sorry. That was actually PlayStation 3, where Resident Evil 5 and 6 came out, wasn't
But
it?
I think I know where you're going with this, though. Hard cut to October 13th, 2016.
Yeah.
And then what's Brian up to?
Brian suddenly, like, every single molecule in Brian's body suddenly became reinvigorated by the thought of video games, because virtual reality became a thing. And trying that for the first time, I mean, you know, like we've told the story 100 times, but in the context of this, when we're all sitting here talking about, oh man, video games are so exciting, and this game was blah blah blah, and this was my whole life, and I played 300 hours in this. I didn't have that experience on PlayStation 4 at all for the first couple of years until PlayStation VR came out, and that's when it was finally mind-blowing again.
I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, VR, you know, PlayStation 1 was, like I said, I grew up on Mega Man. Mega Man is like what first got me into video games, and and I was obsessed with Mega Man, side scrollers, Castlevanias, whatever, Ninja Gaidens. And when PlayStation 1 came out, now this is the new take on my favorite genre of platformers. Now they're 3D, and I loved everything from Crash Bandicoot to Gex to just all of them.
Croc.
Even Jersey Devil and
Marvels.
stuff.
Oh wow.
Marvels. And so for me, VR is the same story, probably the same story as a lot of people, man, where, you know, there's just that experience of something new is kind of gone a little bit with last gen. It started to fade. Everything, you know, obviously the majority of people, as video games are becoming more mainstream, they're discovering this for the first time. So they're like, this is amazing. This is so perfect. This is like, you know, hugely story driven and stuff. And wow, like this is like a movie, like playing a movie. And so I get it. But as somebody who's been there like a million times in the past and really left a lot of room for my own imagination to bring these stories together and stuff, it's like this experience wasn't necessarily doing it for me. And then VR happened. And I just was like, you know, we talked about light guns in our past. I saw Until Dawn Rush of Blood, and I was like, this is where the light gun genre is going. Right. I already have Move controllers. I'm halfway there. Right. And then and it's been, you know, it's been kind of like the Wild West. You know, it's not as much as it was when VR, the first 3 years of VR. But this to me has been this new getting to evolve with it. It's been so exciting to see what this new like frontier feels like, a new frontier of gaming. And you know, it's going to be a super exciting journey to go through. And in the meantime, you know, there's been tons of games with flaws and stuff. I don't even care. I'm like, this, you know, this didn't work, but this did, and this was really cool. And kind of just getting to experience something that I've never experienced before. It's just been absolutely incredible.
So you know what game I played a lot of on PS4?
What's that?
Diablo 3.
Again?
More Diablo 3.
Yeah, I always play Diablo 3.
Nice.
But really for this one, before the PSVR came out, I had sort of started getting back into gaming a little bit more, buying a bunch of the indies and, you know, on the store, stuff that was kind of new to me, like finding a $15, $20 game like Towerfall, like you said, or like something like that. Those cool little experiences. But probably for me, I'm kind of a samurai guy. I love Kurosawa movies and stuff. And so sometimes at the end of a console generation, you get some of the best stuff. And Ghost of Tsushima is really just wowed me. I loved the hell out of it. I even started a side channel that briefly where I was making nature videos inside Ghost of Tsushima and like posting them online to go to sleep. But just such a gorgeous game, such a beautiful world. And like they added the multiplayer, which has been such a big like time suck, but it's great. You know, like they just keep giving us stuff, and it's probably my favorite game this generation. But I also had the sort of you know, October 13th moment that you have, where it's like I had an Oculus DK2, and everything on it sucked. It didn't run well. Nothing was optimized. There weren't games. It was literally tech demos. People say, "Oh, that's a tech demo." These were actual tech demos. That's all it was. And so when the PlayStation VR came out and I tried it in Best Buy, I said, "Holy shit! They actually got this working." properly. And this is incredible. I think Eve Valkyrie was the first one I played, and I had to have the thing like that day. And people still say VR is not there, but if you try Eve Valkyrie for the first time in your life in a Best Buy, it's like, come the fuck on. That's pretty cool, right? Jesus. Like,
I'll tell you, VR got me caring about graphics again for the first time ever. Like, I mean, you know, first of all, a lot of people look at PlayStation VR games, and when they say it's not there, right? A lot of times they're referring to, these look like first gen or like first gen PS3 games, or sometimes like late gen PS2 games. And but you know, you put the headset on, and it's all about immersion. But we've had this immersion for 4 years now, 4+ years, and now I'm ready, man. Like, for the first time in a long time, I care about graphics again, and I'm like, yes, man. I want to see what PlayStation 5 will do. I want to see what PlayStation VR 2 will do in conjunction with the PlayStation 5 to these fucking environments. I want to see what Resident Evil 7 or the next Resident Evil game will look like in a headset that's capable of a higher resolution, that with a box that's capable of rendering these two images at a high resolution for my headset, like, and just giving me that experience for the first time ever. Like, you know, people, AJ was talking about, oh, these games feel like you're playing a movie. I never cared about that on a flat screen. I never cared about the graphics and like, oh, it look like playing a movie. But now I want to be inside of that movie. I do want to play a movie, but I only want to play it from the inside, and I want it to look like fucking realistic as possible. And I think, man, we are so very close to that. You know, you look at something like Resident Evil 7, which of course is my favorite game of this generation and possibly of all time when it comes to, you know, when you play it in VR, and it's so realistic looking even at the resolution that it's running in.
Yeah.
And so you take that just a notch or two higher that PlayStation 5 and PSVR 2 are going to be able to deliver, and that gets me more excited for PSVR 2 and next gen VR than pretty much any console leap ever before this.
To answer the question, the end of the question, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Ignoring backward compatibility,
Dave,
which PlayStation console was your favorite?
So to answer Billy Paw's question, I mean, I think Above and Beyond, man. As much as I loved every single generation of PlayStation, and I had an absolute blast with everything, and I sort of have to remove VR a little bit from PlayStation 4 just because I want to. I want to kind of channel my excitement of being like a kid and remember all this stuff. And I think that the PlayStation 2, as far as the library is concerned, I mean, I just during that time of my life, I just wanted to play everything. And I was actually in a situation, like, I just graduated from college, and I actually had an office job, and I was paying the bills, and I think I was living at home or then like with my brother. And so my bills were like non-existent. Right. And so I was able to spend way too much money on PlayStation 2 games. And I get to play so many things, pretty much everything I wanted to that generation. And
half of them are sitting behind you, aren't they?
No, there were stories involved in that.
Okay.
Nothing I have here is more than 10 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, so PlayStation 2 for sure. And like I said, when they redesigned that console and made it super small, tiny, that was my favorite PlayStation console design ever.
Yeah, I think PS2 is my favorite also, but I'm going to take the liberty of ignoring the part of the question that asked me to ignore backwards capability. Because I think the PS2 is great because you could play all those PS2 games and all those PS1 games. Like, it's the perfect little... I would buy one today just so I could have something to play those games on. Because the library of the PS1 and PS2 combined, that's insane. You know, it's one of the best gaming libraries you can think of on any console ever, or group of consoles. So PS2 for me too. Also, I like the way it looks. I don't know. There's something about it. Just an attractive console to me.
You know, VR is definitely where it's at for me right now. It's literally changed my life in every way possible that I could possibly imagine. But the PS1, it has been, up until before VR, the PlayStation 1 was still my favorite gaming console of all time. I've played so many games on them, so many amazing memories from taking out the games and putting them into CD players and listening to the Jet Moto and Twisted Metal soundtracks, to putting a soundtrack into Grand Theft Auto 1 and driving around with, like, listening to music. You know, Einhander.
Guy right here.
Yeah, Einhander, Air Guys. Like I said, everything from Jersey Devil, Apocalypse starring Bruce Willis. There were so many amazing. No, Apocalypse.
Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Wait, so was he in a movie called Armageddon?
He was in Armageddon. No,
Apocalypse?
there's a game. Yeah, there's a video game called Apocalypse. Fun fact: it was a cyberpunk twin stick shooter, and it actually had System of a Down on a billboard playing music. It also had a band called Snot, which not a lot of people know about. They're actually a really good band.
Did you play one on PS1?
Yeah, I didn't like it very much.
What? But you liked Apocalypse? Oh, you know what? I can't trust anything you say.
I
anymore.
remember one.
Yeah,
one
was
One
fantastic.
was- It was okay. I don't know I don't remember it being fantastic, but I do remember it being okay.
It was something.
Yeah.
But the PlayStation 1, man, the innovation, the just the amazing smorgasbord of games, just the amount and variety and just crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. Crazy taxi, but that's a story for a different day. Guys, we are literally 30 minutes over our due time for this, so this is going to be one hell of a show to edit, but I think it was really nice taking a trip down memory lane and going through all the consoles one by one. Thank you so much, Billy Pop, for that question. If you have a question for next week's Viewer Takeover, make sure you submit it either in our Discord on the Viewer Takeover channel or in the comments below with the hashtag Viewer Takeover, all one word. We'll find it. We'll maybe include it in next week's show, and I promise we won't make fun of you too much for it. If you change your name to GameCat, hashtag GameCat in the comments below so we can give you a shout out on next week's show, just like we gave all those people earlier in this show a shout out. Also, make sure you send your Viewer Takeover introduction to withoutparole@gmail.com and consider supporting the channel at patreon.com/withoutparole.
Do it yourself, Brian.
I was gonna say they I'm never really sure if they're gonna back me up on this or not. It's like once yes, twice. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Viewer Takeover. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite console was, what your favorite games for it were. My name is Brian Paul from this channel right here. That's Dave from Dave Station VR. That's AJ from PSVR Underground. Make sure you subscribe to both of their channels. This was Viewer Takeover, and we're out.
Can I tell you guys an outro story right here? You can outro this, or just keep it in here. One time, my mom, her leg was hurting, and so she decided she was going to use one of those electronic wheelchairs at the like Walmart or Publix or whatever.
Oh
it was.
yeah.
And she had no clue what she was doing, and she immediately ran into a display of pans, and they all fell over, and it made the loudest sound that I've ever heard in my life. And then she got up and walked away from the electric wheelchair, and I was like, "Mom, I can't be seen with you. You just made a fucking mess."
That's a good one.
It was hilarious.
That is really good.